Another day in the circuit board, another opportunity to build something cool. The city is coming along nicely. With the latest developments, there are 41,000 residents living here. How about we add another 10,000 today by continuing the development of the downtown? In this video, we'll be building a significant area of the CPU. In the last video, I've developed the densest area of the city, represented with the tall skyscrapers. So we'll be extending from here, and I start by placing a elementary school, which is something we're in dire need of. Ever since I started zoning high-density residential, the number of students has skyrocketed. So I need to start placing some more of these buildings as I develop the city. It's not totally unrealistic. Usually you see a school every couple of blocks in pretty much most urban cities. I think the problem is that City Skylines 2, you only have one asset for each school type, which makes it quite limitative. The elementary school itself is quite large, and you could definitely make an urban space more diverse if you add smaller assets for elementary education. I've seen screenshots of some people's cities where they stacked like 7 or 8 elementary schools next to one another to cover education demand, which is really not something pretty to look at. I mean, it just looks terrible. You will also see me expanding the high school in a minute because I also had a lot of demand for that as well. When I was placing these couple of plazas next to one another, I noticed that both the fountain in the middle as well as the pavement tiles look different. I guess these are randomly set when you place the asset, which is something I hadn't noticed before. It's a cool feature, but it would be even cooler if you could edit these details after placing the asset. So I just bulldozed and kept placing the second plaza until I got something that looks similar to the first one. Then I proceeded to detail the zoned areas. As usual, I make these artificial parks in between the zone buildings, by building a pathway network connecting everything together, which are then complemented with different types of trees and bushes to make it more vibrant. This is the best way I found so far of dealing with those ugly empty areas between buildings that you can do nothing about. I still place a real park occasionally for the leisure effect as well as for diversity. As the city grows larger, it's important to adjust the public transport system. My tram line in particular is super relevant because it travels pretty much the entire city, from suburbs to downtown. To prevent the line from getting too long, where trams take too long to travel the line and there are loads and loads of people waiting at the stations, I thought it was a good idea to split the line to give people more travel options and also to make use of the extensive rail network of the downtown. So this is what I've done. I had the tram line going all the way across the map. I cut it short, ending at the public transport hub. Starting on this point, I built a second line dedicated to covering the downtown. I then built a third one to cover the newly developed area, also converging at the hub. Later on, these lines can be extended further to cover other areas of the city in all directions. Because I'm going to have lines starting at the transport hub, I needed to add a way for trams to go back the other direction, because they cannot travel backwards in the same line. I later found out a way of achieving this, but regardless, I think what I've done here is also a good solution, which is adding a loop in the line, allowing for trams to change directions. I've built tram loops like these in the previous videos, as temporary solutions while areas further in the tram line are yet to be developed, but these are different because they're going to be part of the final city layout, so they must be pretty. I built them on zone areas and not on top of roads, which is great because this way they don't interfere with road traffic. By adding loops on both ends of the transport hub, trams can change directions after they reach their final stop without having to travel the entire line. After preparing the tram infrastructure, of course, I just needed to make the lines themselves. The first one is easy because I just needed to delete the stops of the original line and make the new second line. But for the third line, I actually had to place the tram shelters first, as these are newly developed areas. With these new developments, I noticed that my tram depot was running at full capacity with all of its trams deployed, so I built 2 additional ones. By the way, I've also noticed that whenever you change the color of a tram line, the color doesn't change at the same rate or at the same time in the 3 carriages of the same vehicle, which I thought was really weird and dumb. I then proceeded with the building of the pathway network for this new area, as well as adding parks, parking lots, and other important services. For this area, I zone high-density commercial at the avenues, as I've done on other parts of the downtown, but instead of zoning high-density residential and office, which usually leads to skyscrapers, I used medium-density residential and low-density office instead. As I mentioned in the past video, I want the top right area on the shoreline of the canal to be the densest area, standing out from the rest of the layout. So I think I'm going to use medium density from now on, and then add spots of high density in some strategic areas. I think this also works to help make the area not looking very clustered. With these new developments, the city's population went from 40,000 to 50,000, and it's starting to look like a real metropole. Around 75% of the entire downtown is complete, and we'll soon be able to tackle other areas such as the coastal area at the sea, an airport area, and agriculture or forestry in the outskirts. I'm not done yet with this video, so stick around as I'm going to build a cool road layout for another city area later on. Okay, so this turned out to be a very friendly district. It has density and it is compact, but at the same time it doesn't look very clustered. As I mentioned, I think I will want to add a bit more density in this area, so perhaps some skyscrapers, very scarcely, so in very strategic places. so it doesn't take away the feel that this area currently has. And I already have some of those, so for example here you can see that this is a high density building. Then over here we have this medium-sized high density office area or office building, and I think I also have another one somewhere. Yeah, there we go. Here's a high-rise office and then a tall commercial tower. These are not very frequent, I noticed. Usually high-density commercial are composed of very short buildings, like this one over here, but from time to time, occasionally one of these bad boys pop up. Let's take a look at our public transport situation, shall we? So, looking at the tram system, it seems to be much more balanced than what we had before. All the lines are at below 50%, which is pretty healthy. Their usage is going to be increased even further as I develop the city. For example, this one, the middle one in this red color, at the moment it is ending at around this location, right in front of the central bank, but eventually I will continue it towards this street as when I start to develop this area over here. The namings of the lines are pretty straightforward, so this one, which is the old line, it pretty much connects the sectors A, B, C and D to the public transport hub. Then we have the newest line, which connects the CPU to the hub in a east-western orientation, and then the same thing with the other line, which connects the CPU to the hub, but with a northern to southern orientation. I think the final blueprint of the public transport hub is going to have 4 lines, so 1 additional line than what we have right now, because we can make another line over here using this tram segment that we have already prepared in our infrastructure to provide tram access to this location of the city whenever we expand towards here. Taking a look at our education now. Yeah, so this is a problem that I was telling you guys about. Our elementary situation is pretty bad at the moment. We have half the capacity than the amount of students that we have, so we should have twice as many elementary schools. That's something I need to start thinking about whenever I move on in future expansions. Perhaps I can add elementary schools like over here in this location, over here, and also over here as well. I'm gonna try to avoid putting more elementary schools in the CPU because I already have this one and it's, I don't know, it seems like it doesn't quite fit. It's good for variety, but I don't know, because the asset is so unique and so vibrant and so different than everything else, it doesn't really quite fit. So I need to be careful with that. But yeah, elementary school is the way that it is. High school, we're just on the verge. College, we are a bit limited, but this is not urgent for the time being. And for university, we have 2,500 eligible students and 0 capacity, which leads us to the next part of this video, which is adding finally a university to the circuit board. For that, I am going to develop this new location. I'm gonna build the university somewhere on this island. And I also think I can prepare the road layout for new developments as well. Perhaps we can even decorate the canal, you know, the shoreline of the canal over here. And speaking of canal, some people suggested that I deleted the dam and continue the canal all the way until the ocean over here, so that I could create a ship line that would connect to the downtown. Unfortunately, I'm not gonna do that, and I can actually tell you why. Let me show you why that's not going to be possible. If I go here and select the ship line and I select the narrow seaway, which is the thinnest line, you can clearly see how large and thick it is. So it would never look fitting in this location. And if I go with a wide seaway, you can just see how massive this thing is. And if we take a look at the harbor, I mean, look at this. This thing is just massive. There's no way this would fit in here. So I think I'm gonna reserve the harbor and the cargo harbor for this area of the map. But anyway, let's move on and let's start creating. Alrighty, so I started preparing the area for the university. I decided that I would put it at the end of the 6-lane avenue. The area here was quite hilly, so I terraformed it a little bit, and the facility would be placed at a slightly higher altitude than the layout below. The technical university asset is super large, which is fine, but it makes it quite limited to put it at the city center, so I assume this type of facility realistically would need to be built on the outskirts. Nevertheless, it is close enough to the office district, so this location actually makes quite a lot of sense to me. I extended one of the avenues across the mountain via a tunnel and bridging over the river towards the other margin, leading to the rail roundabout, or as we call it, the railabout. Still not sure what am I going to build here, but that's a problem for the future. I then developed the layout on the right side of the city hall. For this, I used a very extensive set of guidelines to help me build the shape that I wanted to build. I will have some parallel streets ending at roundabouts, just like I've done in other areas of the city. I know the city hasn't been looking like a circuit board, as I planned it to be at the beginning of the series, but that's because I've been mostly developing its core, its CPU. It will get there eventually, especially when I start creating more sets of suburbs. Of course, I just had to place the giant Ferris wheel next to the canal. It was just so fitting. I placed it originally, but then I rotated it so that the wheel side was closer to the canal. Another asset that I've been wanting to place for quite some time now is the large police headquarters. There was no space for it in the CPU, and I didn't want to place it at the edge just like I've done for the hospital and fire headquarters, as that would be a bit repetitive. So I thought this was actually a good place for it. I've been having some crime scene pop-ups occasionally in the downtown, so hopefully this will help address it, as this asset has over 30 police vehicles when fully extended, and a helicopter as well. In one of the edges of the layout, I placed the welfare office, because this area is going to be dedicated to low-rent housing, so I thought it would be adequate. Low-rent housing will also provide housing for students wanting to go to the university. Later on, we can even build a pathway crossing the canal and connecting this residential district to the community college as well. It was then time to build the pathway network. I will be using the same layout that I've done on the suburbs and use the pathways to outline the streets. They will also be crucial to foster walkability by creating pathways that cross the streets perpendicularly. This is because with this layout that I've been using in a city, the streets themselves tend to be quite long and with a lot of dead ends. Using pathways to connect opposing roads prevents long and unnecessary car drives, providing walking access to pretty much anywhere nearby. Quick tip: if you're in this situation where you have two crossing roads and the zoning blocks don't quite line up with the road you want them to, you can simply use a pathway to remove zoning on the unwanted street and then delete it right after. I also extended the tram line all the way until the entrance of the university. This will be the end of this particular line. It will loop in a circle and then go back the other way. Of course, I provided easy access with pathways. Finally, I adjusted the final segment of the canal, as this area was still not developed with keys. So I built this as well as a transformer station to connect them to the power grid. This wasn't really necessary, but I wanted to get rid of those yellow pop-ups. So I ended up going with the technical university because I thought it was the most useful, or at least it had the best buffs. 10% more industrial efficiency and 10% more office efficiency, which is pretty insane considering the amount of offices and industrial that we have in the city. And also, what else would you be putting in the circuit board? The medical university also has some buffs, but I don't think they are as strong or as good as the ones from the technical university. These have less student capacity than the regular university, however, so we might need to place another one of these assets somewhere along the future. I'm still not sure if I want to build a dedicated campus around this university. It seems very complete the way it is right now, and super massive, but that's something to think about. But anyway, I think this area is looking great already, at least the basic infrastructure and services. This is going to be a zone dedicated to low-rent housing, as I've said. So we have the welfare office as well as the police headquarters so that people behave. And of course, eventually I'm gonna add parks, parking lots, another elementary school somewhere around here, but I'll leave that to a future episode. The Ferris wheel itself looks very good. I like it a lot. I think that's a lot to this area and to the canal and to the city as well. I think this is starting to look like a real city someone would like to live in. Perhaps when a game has more modding and asset capabilities, we can add a small local ferry line in this canal as well to make it look even better than what it is right now. And it seems that we have a lot of people waiting for the tram in the public transport hub. So let's take a look at each individual tram line and see what we can do about it. In this particular line, we can see that we have 800 passengers waiting for the tram, so it definitely needs more vehicles. If I click on this station, I can take a look at each line individually. So we can see that the pink line definitely needs some more vehicles because it has two stations that have a lot of people waiting. The purple line, you know, it has a station that's somewhat full but not really problematic. And the red line, it's pretty much manageable. So I think I'm gonna go to the pink line. It seems to be the only one that has a serious issue. And I'm gonna double the amount of vehicles that it has. And that should help. And here are the new trams. So that's the third one, and there should be a fourth one coming in. Here it is. But anyway guys, that's going to be it for this video. Thank you for watching and I will see you on the next one. Bye bye.